I want you to think about your last doctor's appointment. You know, you're sitting in a slightly too cold room.
Oh, yeah, perched on that awful, crinkly exam table paper.
Right, exactly, the crinkly paper. And you start describing your symptoms, and you watch your physician, like, listening and nodding and taking notes.
Yeah, it feels very personal.
It does. It feels like this deeply intuitive, almost artistic human process. Like, it
Yeah.
relies on this mystical blend of science and just, years of seasoned clinical instinct.
Like they're putting together a puzzle in their head.
Right. But what happens when an algorithm can just do all that math instantly? Like, what happens when a machine enters that room?
It's a huge question. I mean, it completely disrupts that familiar rhythm.
It really does. And that's exactly what we're exploring today. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating article. It's titled, AI is Getting Better at Diagnosis. That doesn't mean doctors become less important.
Yeah, it's a great piece.
And the mission for this deep dive really is to figure out what actually makes a clinician valuable when a machine can spot a disease in, like, absolute seconds.
Right, because it forces us to ask, what is the actual core of medical practice?
Exactly. And you, listening to this right now, you are going to interact with the healthcare system continuously throughout your life. I mean, we all are.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So understanding how AI is changing your doctor's role, it's going to fundamentally shift how you view your own medical care.
Totally. It changes how you view your diagnoses and really the actual conversations you have in that exam room.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think we have to start by looking at how the medical field actually defines a diagnosis in the first place.
Yeah, we have to start there.
Yeah.
Because the public perception is, it's really skewed.
Skewed by, like, TV shows, right?
Yeah.
Medical dramas.
Exactly. Television portrays diagnosis as this, sudden, brilliant epiphany. The camera zooms in.
The dramatic music swells.
Right. And the doctor just connects 3 totally unrelated symptoms and declares some super rare disease. But the clinical reality is that many diagnoses are actually highly structured. They're mathematical. And honestly, they're binary.
Okay, wait, so being a doctor isn't like being a medical Sherlock Holmes relying on pure instinct. It's more like navigating a highly advanced flowchart.
Yeah, essentially, yes. I mean, think about it. A fracture either appears as a distinct disruption on an X-ray or it doesn't.
Right, it's broken or it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a lab value, like your white blood cell count. It either crosses a specific numerical threshold that triggers an action or it stays below it. The whole architecture of medicine is built on these strict binary pathways.
Okay, I mean, that makes total sense for something obvious, like a broken arm,
Yeah.
right? A bone is clearly snapped. Or a chemical is just clearly elevated in a blood test.
Sure.
But surely conditions involving, like, mental health or subjective pain or just emotional states, those have to require a more intuitive leap, right? I mean, you can't just draw blood and run a lab panel for human suffering.
You'd think so, but even those highly subjective conditions, they rely heavily on standardized criteria. I mean, the flowchart still has to function.
Wait, really? How?
Well, the medical system can't just operate on pure vibes,
Right. Yeah, vibes-based medicine sounds like a terrible idea.
Exactly. So if you look at depression screenings or cognitive decline assessments, concussion protocols, these are mechanisms designed specifically to convert a complex, messy human experience into a scorable pattern.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they use heavily validated questionnaires, and they essentially assign numerical values to subjective feelings.
So it's still just math at the end of the day.
Pretty much. Once those numbers cross a threshold, the diagnostic criteria are met. It transforms the qualitative into the quantitative.
I was looking at the source material, and there's this one diagnosis mentioned that completely shifted how I view this. It's the diagnosis for fear of falling.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect example.
Right. Because how does a clinician even quantify a fear? Like, you can't put someone in an MRI machine, scan their brain, and just point to a glowing pixel that proves, hey, this person is terrified of walking down the stairs.
No, you can't. So the physician maps that fear mathematically. They use an established rubric.
Okay, so what does that look like?
They look for specific behavioral indicators. So they ask the patient, have you actively restricted your daily activities? Do you feel unsteady walking outside your home? Or, has your confidence in your mobility measurably declined over the last 6 months?
Okay, so it's a checklist.
It is a checklist. And if the patient's responses check the required boxes on that standardized rubric, the clinical diagnosis of fear of falling is officially recorded.
That is wild.
It's just a calculated pattern match. It functions exactly like checking a blood sugar level, just using behavioral data instead of chemical data.
So if human diagnosis is mostly just navigating this highly structured flowchart, I mean, it entirely explains why algorithms are suddenly getting so good at it.
Exactly.
Because a machine doesn't get bored navigating flowcharts.
No, not at all. That structured pattern, that is an algorithm's native language.
Right.
If you feed a neural network millions of examples of a specific condition, it just maps the statistical relationships between those data points. And it does it with a level of granular precision that the human brain just isn't wired to process.
We just can't hold that much data in our heads.
We can't. We use heuristics, like mental shortcuts. But the machine is using massive statistical topologies.
Let's look at how that actually works under the hood, because the sources point out that AI is showing like massive promise in detecting lung nodules on CT scans.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, and identifying diabetic retinopathy from retinal images, and even flagging abnormalities in mammograms.
But how is the machine processing a retinal scan differently than, say, a highly trained ophthalmologist?
Well, a human physician looks at the retinal scan holistically. You know, they rely on their biological visual cortex to spot anomalies based on their training.
They just kind of take the whole picture in. Right. But human vision is highly susceptible to something called inattentional blindness.
What is that?
It means if the doctor's brain is intensely focused on looking for one specific type of, like, vascular lesion, their visual cortex might physically filter out a completely different, subtle abnormality just a few millimeters away.
Oh, wow. So they literally just don't see it because they're looking for something else.
Exactly. But the AI, it processes that image pixel by pixel. It doesn't see an eye.
Right, it just sees numbers.
Yeah, it analyzes a massive grid of millions of numerical color and contrast values. It compares the geometry of every single pixel against millions of prior scans, and it evaluates the entire grid simultaneously.
Okay, so the AI doesn't actually understand what a lung nodule is. It just flags a cluster of pixels that, like, mathematically correlates with a pattern.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but humans don't usually walk into a clinic with a perfectly isolated textbook issue.
No, they rarely do.
Right, people don't just organize themselves neatly into distinct diagnostic categories. What happens when someone walks into the clinic with something super vague? Let's say a patient simply complains of, like, just being tired all the time.
Yeah, fatigue perfectly illustrates the messy reality of clinical medicine. That's a great example from the text.
Because fatigue could be anything, right?
Exactly. That patient might be suffering from anemia, meaning they lack healthy red blood cells, or they might have severe sleep apnea.
Which restricts their oxygen at night.
Right. Or they could be dealing with clinical depression. They could be having side effects from a new medication. Or, honestly, they could be experiencing 3 of those compounding at the exact same time.
Right. Conditions coexist. And AI struggles immensely here, doesn't it?
It does, because it lacks external contextual awareness. It can't look at a tired patient and factor in that they recently went through a really stressful divorce.
Right. Or they just started a crazy night shift job.
Exactly. It merely compares isolated data points to past cases. Humans are just much better at navigating these overlapping gray areas because we can synthesize that non-quantifiable context.
But, okay, humans can navigate the gray area, sure, but human cognition has its own severe flaws.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about diagnostic drift and decision fatigue. I mean, if I am the absolute last appointment of the day on a Friday.
Yeah, like 4:45 p.m.
Exactly. And my doctor has been analyzing complex medical charts for 10 hours. Their cognitive battery is just depleted.
Completely drained. And
Yep.
the brain naturally relies on mental shortcuts to save energy, which is exactly how subtle diagnostic clues get missed. What's fascinating here is that AI serves as the ultimate stabilizing force against that human inconsistency.
Because the machine doesn't get tired.
Right. A machine maintains a state of static algorithmic sensitivity. It processes its 18th complex patient of the day with the exact same rigor and pixel-by-pixel analysis as its very first patient.
It doesn't get distracted.
No decision fatigue at all. It doesn't forget a rare condition just because it hasn't seen a case of it in 5 years. AI provides a mechanical tirelessness that just fundamentally counteracts our biological limitations.
So it creates this baseline of absolute consistency.
Exactly. It stabilizes human imperfection.
Okay, so the machine wins on tireless consistency. It identifies the pattern perfectly every single time. But does getting the actual name of the disease right mean the AI actually understands the patient sitting on the exam table?
No, and that is where the controversy in modern medicine really begins. People incorrectly assume that recognizing a pattern is the exact same thing as understanding a patient.
And they're not.
They are entirely different cognitive processes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's return to that fear of falling example.
Okay.
We established how the diagnosis is made, right? The rubric, the specific behavioral indicators. But let's look at the actual root causes.
Yeah.
The text outlines 4 very distinct patients who all walk out of the clinic with the exact same diagnostic label, fear of falling.
Yes, the 4 patients.
So patient 1 developed this fear after suffering a severe pelvic fracture last year.
Right, so that first case is rooted entirely in tangible physical trauma. They have structural damage, scar tissue, functional muscular limitation.
Okay, but patient 2 hasn't fallen at all. They just have steadily worsening balance due to peripheral neuropathy.
Yeah, a nerve damage.
And then patient 3 is physically perfectly stable. Their muscles and nerves are totally fine, but they lost all their confidence after a long, super disorienting stay in the hospital.
Right, from severe pneumonia.
Exactly. And then you have patient 4, who is avoiding movement strictly because they suffer from severe generalized anxiety.
So you have 4 completely different physiological, neurological, and psychological realities, but they're all grouped under one identical diagnostic label on a medical chart.
It honestly sounds like the AI is a highly advanced fire alarm.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like it flawlessly detects the smoke, it analyzes the particles in the air, and it rings the bell to say, yes, there is a fire right here. But the doctor is the firefighter who has to walk into the building, assess the environment, and figure out exactly how to put that unique fire out.
Right, because if you throw water on a grease fire...
You don't put it out, you cause a massive explosion.
Exactly. Handing a patient a diagnostic label is really just pointing at the smoke. The algorithm excels at that detection, but the firefighter must execute a targeted, context-aware intervention.
You can't just treat those 4 patients the same way just because their charts have the same alphanumeric code.
You really can't. I mean, the first patient recovering from the fracture, they require targeted physical therapy. You have to focus on structural strength.
Right. What about the second patient?
The one with neuropathy. Well, their nerves are failing to send proper spatial signals to the brain, so they need specialized neurological balance training to compensate for that.
And the third and fourth patients don't even have a structural deficit. I mean, their bodies work completely fine.
Which means treating them physically would be completely useless.
Right.
The third patient requires environmental modifications in their home, installing grab bars, removing trip hazards, just to rebuild their confidence safely.
And the fourth patient?
They need psychological support, cognitive behavioral techniques, maybe gradual exposure therapy to regulate their nervous system.
So the fire alarm doesn't put out the fire.
Mm-hmm.
AI identifies the signal, but humans determine its meaning.
And this represents the critical transition from pattern recognition to clinical interpretation. The algorithm processes the signal, sure, but the clinician has to understand why that signal exists.
They have to look at the whole person.
Exactly. They have to see what systemic factors are contributing to it and how this condition interacts with the reality of the unique individual sitting in front of them. The doctor translates that math into a personalized treatment strategy.
So what does this all mean for the future of medicine? Because historically, doctors were kind of the ultimate gatekeepers of scarce medical knowledge. You went to a physician because they possessed this vast mental library of diagnostic patterns.
Right.
But if the machine is permanently taking over those rapid pattern recognition duties, are we just making doctors obsolete? Kind of like elevator operators.
Not at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire public narrative surrounding AI in healthcare is just framed incorrectly. It's not a zero-sum competition.
It's not man versus machine.
No. History demonstrates that when transformative technology arrives in a highly skilled profession, it rarely removes complexity from that field. It redistributes the complexity.
I like the text mention with calculators, right?
Exactly. The invention of the pocket calculator didn't render mathematicians obsolete.
Right. We still have mathematicians.
It just freed them from the tedious, error-prone manual labor of long division, so they could focus entirely on higher-level algebra and, complex problem solving.
The same principle applies to GPS technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, GPS didn't eliminate the need for logistics and supply chain management. It just shifted the focus away from memorizing complex street maps.
To optimizing vast delivery networks.
Yes.
And in medicine, earlier technological leaps like MRI machines, they didn't eliminate doctors. They provided a dramatically deeper level of biological data that required an even higher level of clinical interpretation.
So AI is just the next iteration of this evolution.
Yes. It will shift clinicians away from being pure pattern memorizers to being interpreters and strategists.
The complexity is redistributed, so the future clinician acts as a guide. They spend way less cognitive energy just manually hunting for a signal in a sea of data, and far more energy deciding what that signal actually means for the patient's future.
Consider what shared decision-making actually looks like in a post-AI clinical landscape.
Okay.
The algorithm might analyze a patient's scans and confidently conclude with like 99% probability that a lung tumor is malignant. It answers the narrow question perfectly.
It's found the fire.
Right. But the algorithm cannot look at an 80-year-old patient and weigh the statistical survival benefit of an aggressive surgery against the devastating physical impact that surgery might have on their quality of life.
Because the algorithm calculates cellular survival, but the patient might care significantly more about, like, whether they'll have the stamina to travel or if they'll still be able to play with their grandchildren next summer.
Exactly. You cannot compute a good life. You can't write an equation for human fulfillment.
Yeah, someone still has to sit with you to decide what matters most.
The physician has to sit in that room, look the patient in the eye, and navigate those agonizingly difficult personal trade-offs. Those discussions require profound empathy. They require the ability to navigate immense medical uncertainty.
Because the machine doesn't do uncertainty well.
No. The clinician has to guide the patient through a labyrinth of risk assessments, balancing clinical protocols against the patient's own values. An algorithm can provide the map of the disease, but it absolutely cannot walk the human being through the maze of recovery. By offloading the computational heavy lifting to AI, we are essentially giving doctors the space to lean fully into those deeply human areas of care. We are giving them the time back to actually listen.
Which completely flips the narrative of technology making medicine colder, doesn't it?
It really does. It actually forces the medical profession to become more intrinsically human.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So to kind of distill what we've unpacked today, AI is introducing this unprecedented level of static, tireless consistency to the structured math of diagnosis. It processes the pixel grids, it navigates the flowcharts, and it never suffers from decision fatigue.
Right.
But the messy gray areas of treatment, the actual translation of a cold signal into a personalized care strategy, that remains the absolute domain of the physician. The machine handles the science, so the doctor can elevate the art.
Perfectly said.
Which, honestly, leaves us with a truly fascinating puzzle to consider as we wrap up today's deep dive.
What's that?
Well, if algorithms eventually take over the vast majority of rote pattern recognition, and that frees up physicians to focus entirely on human interpretation and care, will the entire medical education system have to be torn down and restructured?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question.
Right. Like, will the doctors of tomorrow be selected for medical school less for their ability to memorize massive textbooks and more for their exceptional emotional intelligence and communication skills and empathy?
It fundamentally rewrites the definition of a good doctor.
It really does. So the next time you find yourself sitting on that crinkly paper on the exam table waiting for the door to open, just think about the invisible partnership operating in the background. The algorithm is running the math, so the human can care for you.
It's a pretty amazing future to think about.
It really is. We invite you to keep questioning the world around you, because the deepest dives always lead to the most fascinating questions.